Are you seriously joking with me right now? My mother snapped, her tone razor-sharp and cutting. Madison has always been the one looking out for our family. Why on earth would you attempt to steal that recognition from her? I remained seated, jaw slightly agape, as Madison positioned herself smugly on the couch's edge, flashing me that self-satisfied grin that twisted my insides into knots. I'm Samantha Myers, 29 years old, working in marketing consultation. To everyone around me, I'm the dependable, practical family member, the one who handles responsibilities without seeking recognition or praise. That's exactly why, several months back, I chose to anonymously place $10,000 in my parents' mailbox, simply wanting to ease their financial burden. Madison, my younger sister and a financially struggling artist who's perpetually been the family's focal point, was the sole person I confided in about this gesture. Never did I anticipate she'd steal credit for my gift, soaking up all the admiration from our parents and extended family. Initially, I remained silent, assuming the conflict wasn't worthwhile and hoping Madison might eventually confess the truth herself. However, as weeks became months, every family gathering featured my parents raving about Madison's incredible generosity and expressing gratitude for having such a wonderful daughter. The more they celebrated her supposed kindness, the more my fury intensified. This wasn't about wanting credit, it was about her perpetuating a complete fabrication while I sat silently, holding back my frustration. The most infuriating aspect? I had zero evidence to support my claim. When I'd left that money, I hadn't planned ahead, just stuffed $10,000 in cash into an envelope and placed it in their mailbox. No security footage, no written notes, no bank transaction records, absolutely nothing. The gift was meant to remain anonymous, after all. I never conceived I'd eventually need proof of my generosity. So when I finally reached my breaking point during Sunday dinner and declared, "Actually, I'm the person who left that money," the entire room fell into dead silence, every gaze turning toward me with complete disbelief. Madison simply sat motionless, her expression perfectly displaying shock, as though she was the victim of false accusations. My mother spoke first, her voice cutting and protective. "Samantha, that's completely absurd. Why would you make such a ridiculous claim? We're all aware it was Madison. She's been incredibly considerate, and we're deeply thankful for her assistance." My father nodded in agreement, staring at me as if I'd just uttered the most preposterous statement imaginable. "There's no need to turn this into some sort of rivalry," he said, his tone disappointingly dismissive. "Madison, naturally, delivered a flawless performance. I'm shocked you'd attempt something like this, Sam," she said, her voice quavering as if genuinely wounded. "I understand there's been tension between us lately, but this is really—" She looked toward our parents for validation, and they immediately rushed to console her while I sat there in complete amazement. It was absolutely maddening. She wasn't merely lying, she was intensifying her deception, and everyone was completely buying into it. I gripped my hands into fists beneath the table, fighting to maintain a steady voice. "I'm not attempting to create competition," I stated, staring directly at Madison. "I simply want honesty to prevail. I'm the one who placed that money in the mailbox. You're claiming responsibility for something you never did, and that's wrong." Madison shook her head, her expression mixing disbelief with pity, as though she couldn't fathom I'd sink to such depths. "You don't even have evidence, Sam," she said, her voice gentle yet condescending. "Why would you leave cash in that manner? That doesn't seem characteristic of you. Honestly, it appears you're just trying to destroy this for me because you're envious." Her words hit hard, and I noticed my mother frowning as if Madison made valid points. I understood then that regardless of my arguments, they were too invested in their perception of her to even contemplate I might be truthful. My mother sighed heavily, shaking her head like she was managing a child's tantrum. "Samantha, this jealousy has become ridiculous. Madison has always been so thoughtful, and rather than celebrating what she's accomplished for us, you're attempting to tear her down. It's truly disappointing." My father added his annoyingly patronizing tone. "We love you, Samantha, even without monetary gifts. You don't need to compete with your sister for our affection." He offered me a pitying smile, as if he was graciously forgiving me for something I hadn't even committed. Meanwhile, Madison remained there, appearing wounded yet smug, her hands folded properly in her lap. The entire situation felt surreal, like I'd been transported into a terrible sitcom where truth held no value. I couldn't endure it any longer. The disbelief, the condescension, Madison's arrogant expression. I'd reached my limit. I rose abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, and glared at all three of them. You know what? You're being completely ridiculous, I said, my voice sharp and unsteady from suppressing all my pent-up emotions. You're so busy adoring Madison that you can't even consider she might be deceiving you. But someday you'll discover the truth, and it'll be too late. I turned toward Madison, who still sat there playing the innocent victim, and you, I said, pointing directly at her, someday you'll regret your actions. Maybe not immediately, but when you need someone trustworthy to depend on, you'll realize you've destroyed the only relationship that truly mattered. I didn't wait for their responses. I collected my belongings and departed, slamming the door behind me. I refused to sit there and let them portray me as the envious liar any longer. In the following weeks, everything transformed. My relationship with my parents became painfully distant. The regular texts and phone calls reduced to almost nothing, and when we did communicate, it felt remote, like strangers navigating polite conversation. As for Madison, I heard nothing from her, and honestly, I preferred it that way. Every family event or gathering, I found excuses to avoid attending. The thought of sharing the same space with her, pretending nothing had occurred, was unbearable. The only person I could turn to was Katie, my closest friend. One evening over wine at her apartment, I finally released everything. I don't know what hurts more, I said, my voice cracking, that Madison could betray me like this, or that my parents were so quick to side with her. Katie didn't interrupt, just listened attentively with that compassionate expression she always wore when I needed her most. It's as if all the years I spent trying to be the good daughter mean absolutely nothing. They'll always choose her. Katie reached over, squeezing my hand. You don't deserve this treatment, Sam. None of it. You did something selfless, and they couldn't recognize it. That's their failure, not yours. Her words provided some comfort, but the pain in my chest remained. Several months later, I visited my grandparents, hoping to find some solace away from the tension with my parents and Madison. But the moment I entered, I sensed something was wrong. The usual warmth was absent, replaced by awkward nods and forced smiles. As I sat down, I overheard my Aunt Linda whispering to one of my cousins, "It's just tragic, isn't it? You'd expect Samantha could have been happy for her sister instead of trying to create problems." My stomach plummeted. I turned to look at her, but she quickly averted her gaze, pretending she hadn't just spoken loudly enough for me to hear. My grandmother, sensing the tension, attempted to ease things by offering me a plate of cookies, as if that could somehow resolve the awkwardness. "You know, dear," she said gently, "Madison has been so wonderful to your parents. It's truly inspiring how she stepped up for them." My chest constricted as I realized Madison had contaminated their opinions. They all believed her version of events, and I had become the ungrateful troublemaker in their eyes. I remained just long enough to be courteous, but by the time I left, the lump in my throat felt permanent. Departing my grandparents' home that day felt heavier than anticipated. The words I'd overheard replayed in my mind like a damaged recording, each one stinging worse than the last. It wasn't merely the injustice, it was realizing that Madison had actively worked to damage my reputation with people who were supposed to love me. It was infuriating, but more than that, it was deeply hurtful. When I arrived home, I sat in my car for an extended period, clutching the steering wheel and staring into space. The worst aspect wasn't just that my family believed her lies, it was knowing that no matter what I said, they'd already formed their conclusions. Sitting in my car, I reminded myself of the harsh reality. There was no way to prove my innocence. I had been so focused on keeping the gift anonymous that I hadn't left a single piece of evidence. No receipts, no bank transfers, nothing. Just an envelope filled with cash dropped into their mailbox. Since everyone believed Madison, what options did I have? If my own parents didn't trust me, what chance did I have with the rest of the family? It felt like I was shouting into an empty void with no one caring enough to listen. The reality was painfully obvious. There was nothing I could say or do to change their minds. All I could do now was walk away and attempt to rebuild my life without their approval. As I sat there staring blankly through the windshield, one thought kept cycling through my mind. I needed a miracle. Something extraordinary. Something that would reverse the situation and finally make them see the truth. It wasn't sufficient to simply walk away. I wanted justice. I wanted them to know who I truly was, not the villain Madison had painted me to be. But what could such a miracle even look like? I had no proof, no way to support my side of the story. For months, I'd remained quiet, trying to preserve my dignity, but now silence felt like my adversary. Something had to change. I just didn't know how or when. But deep inside, I clung to the hope that eventually, something would happen to expose Madison for who she truly was. Just as I was spiraling in my thoughts, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I grabbed it expecting a spam notification or a random update, but when I unlocked it, my heart skipped a beat. It was a message from Madison. "Hey Sam, I really need to speak with you. It's important." I stared at the screen, my emotions swirling between anger, suspicion, and curiosity. Madison hadn't contacted me in months. The timing couldn't have been more bizarre, but I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach that whatever she wanted wouldn't be good. Still, part of me couldn't resist the urge to discover what she had to say. I stared at Madison's message for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. Every instinct urged me to respond immediately, to demand to know what she wanted, but then I stopped myself. Madison had spent months twisting the narrative and letting everyone think the worst of me. She could wait. I set my phone aside and decided not to let her urgency control my response. Whatever was so important could wait until I was ready. The following day, after a restless night and careful consideration, I finally responded. "What's so important, Madison?" "Make it brief." I wasn't in the mood for games and wasn't about to let her think I was eager to hear from her. Madison replied almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting for my response. "Can I come over?" "I really need your assistance, Sam. I'm in a difficult situation." The tone of her message was pleading, which was unusual for her. Madison rarely admitted to needing anyone, especially me. I debated momentarily before typing back. What kind of assistance are we discussing? I wasn't about to let her waltz in and dump her problems on me without a clear explanation. Whatever this was, I wouldn't let her manipulate me into another mess. Not again. Her next message arrived quickly. "I'm struggling financially. I can't keep up with everything and don't know where else to turn. Please, Sam, just hear me out." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head at the irony. Madison, the golden child who could do no wrong, was now approaching me for help. The same sister who'd lied to our parents and dragged my name through the mud was suddenly desperate enough to ask for my assistance. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her handle the mess she'd created. But another part, the one that still wanted some form of justice, knew this might be the opportunity I'd been waiting for. I typed back, "Fine. Come over tomorrow. We'll talk." If she wanted my help, she was going to have to play by my rules this time. The next afternoon, Madison appeared at my door looking nothing like her usual self. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her face pale and exhausted, and she wore an old hoodie I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I almost felt pity for her, but then I reminded myself why she was here. "I didn't know where else to go," she said as I stepped aside to let her enter. She sat on my couch's edge, fidgeting with her hands, avoiding eye contact. "Things have been really difficult, Sam. I'm behind on rent, my credit cards are maxed out, and I can barely afford food. I don't know what else to do." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, keeping my tone steady. "So you're asking me for money," I said bluntly. She flinched, but didn't deny it. "After everything you've done, you think I'm just going to bail you out?" The room was silent except for the faint sound of her breathing, and I could see her struggling to find the right words. Madison looked up at me, her eyes wide and desperate. "I've already asked everyone else, Sam. Friends, acquaintances, anyone I could think of. I didn't want to involve Mom and Dad in this, and I figured I couldn't exactly approach the rest of the family after." She trailed off, looking down at her hands. I raised an eyebrow. "After what?" After lying to them for months about something you didn't do? I asked sharply. She winced, but didn't argue. So let me understand this correctly. You've exhausted all your options, and now I'm your last resort? The sister you lied about and threw under the bus. She nodded slowly, her voice barely audible. I know I don't deserve it, but I didn't know who else to turn to. Please, Sam, I'm begging you. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but another part saw an opportunity, a way to finally set the record straight. I took a deep breath, shaking my head as I looked at her. No, Madison, I said firmly. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock. I'm not giving you money. Not after everything you've done. She looked like she was about to cry. Sam, please. I wouldn't be here if I had any other choice. I'm desperate. I'm sure you are, I said, my tone cold. But you made your choices, Madison. You lied to our family, you threw me under the bus, and now you expect me to help you out? That's not going to happen. I crossed my arms, standing my ground. For the first time, I felt no guilt, just a sense of clarity. Madison stared at me for a long moment, her shoulders slumping as she realized I wasn't going to change my mind. She stood up slowly, grabbing her bag with trembling hands. I understand, she said softly, her voice heavy with sadness. I know I messed up, and I don't deserve your help. I didn't know where else to go. She paused at the door, glancing back at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry, Sam. For everything. I truly am. Her voice cracked on the last word, and before I could respond, she opened the door and stepped out, closing it quietly behind her. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty space she'd left behind. I wasn't sure what I felt, relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. But I knew I'd made the right decision. A few days later, my phone buzzed while I was making coffee. I glanced at the screen and saw my dad's name. It wasn't often he called me directly, so I answered, curiosity and slight apprehension building in my chest. Hi, Dad, I said, trying to sound casual. Samantha, he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. We were hoping you could join us for dinner this Friday. Madison has asked to see us all, and she says it's important. Your mother, and I think it would mean a lot if you were there. I froze momentarily, my mind racing. Madison? Important? It didn't take much to figure out this wasn't going to be a normal family dinner. Did she mention what it's about? I asked, my tone guarded. No, just that it's something she needs to do in person, he said. Please, Sam. It would mean a lot to all of us. His voice was calm, but I could sense the unspoken plea in his words. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. All right, I'll be there, I said, though part of me was already bracing for whatever was coming. Friday evening, I pulled into my parents' driveway, my stomach churning. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my thoughts. Whatever Madison had planned, it was clear this wasn't going to be a simple family dinner. After taking a deep breath, I grabbed my bag and headed inside. The house smelled like my mom's pot roast, a familiar scent that usually brought comfort, but tonight only intensified my stomach's tension. As I entered the dining room, I saw my parents, grandparents, and Madison already seated around the table. My grandparents smiled at me warmly, but there was unmistakable tension in the air. Madison looked down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. My dad stood as I entered, giving me a hesitant smile. Samantha, glad you're here, he said, motioning to the empty chair next to him. I nodded silently, taking my seat, my gaze flickering to Madison, waiting to see what this important meeting was really about. Just as the awkward silence began to stretch, Madison let out a shaky breath. Before anyone could react, she broke down sobbing uncontrollably. Her shoulders shook as she buried her face in her hands, the sound echoing throughout the room. My mom gasped, rushing to her side, while my grandparents exchanged confused looks. What's wrong, sweetheart? My mom asked, placing a hand on Madison's back, her voice full of concern. My dad leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Madison, what's going on? I didn't move. I didn't need an explanation because I already knew. Watching her unravel, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, vindication, and an odd sense of pity. This was it. She was cracking under the weight of everything she'd done. I stayed silent, waiting to see what she'd say next, the tension in the room so thick it was almost suffocating. Through her sobs, Madison began to speak, her voice trembling but loud enough to silence the room. "I can't keep lying anymore," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. "The $10,000, it wasn't from me. It was Samantha. She's the one who left the money in the mailbox." She paused, her chest heaving as she tried to collect herself. "I took the credit because I wanted to feel even more loved, more appreciated. I've never felt like I was in anyone's shadow. Mom and Dad have always protected me, always supported me, but I wanted more. When I saw what Samantha had done, I was jealous. I wanted to be seen as the one who could do something that big, something that meaningful." She glanced at my parents, her face pale and full of regret. I didn't think about how much it would hurt her or what it would do to all of us. I just wanted to hold on to that feeling of being special. And when Samantha tried to speak up, I lied again. I panicked because I didn't want to lose the way you looked at me. I didn't want to lose being the one you were proud of. Finally, she looked at me, her voice breaking completely. "I'm so sorry, Sam. You didn't deserve any of this. I was selfish, and I let it go too far." She broke down again, her head in her hands, as the room fell into stunned silence, everyone too shocked to speak. As Madison spoke, I sat frozen in my chair, a storm of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, vindication, disbelief, sadness. It all hit me at once. Hearing her finally admit the truth after all this time should have felt satisfying, but it didn't. Instead, there was a hollow ache in my chest, a reminder of everything her lies had taken from me. My relationship with our parents, my place in the family, my peace of mind. I glanced at my mom and dad, their faces pale with shock, their eyes flickering between me and Madison as they tried to piece it all together. They looked devastated, but I couldn't find it in me to feel sorry for them. They'd chosen to believe her over me, and now they were seeing the fallout of that choice. Part of me wanted to scream, "I told you so," but I stayed quiet, letting Madison's words hang heavy in the room. This was her moment to face the consequences, and I wasn't going to take that away from her. But still, as much as I wanted justice, I couldn't shake the hurt of knowing it took her this long to finally come clean. My mom was the first to speak, her voice shaky and thick with emotion. "Samantha, I don't even know what to say," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "We were so blind, so quick to assume you were just being jealous. We never even considered that you might have been telling the truth. And now I see how unfair we've been to you." My dad nodded, his face pale and full of guilt. "We should have listened, Sam. We should have trusted you instead of shutting you down. I can't believe we let this go on for so long. I'm so sorry for everything we said, for doubting you. You didn't deserve that. Not from us." They looked devastated, their regret written across their faces. I could see my mom's hands trembling as she reached across the table, her voice breaking. "We let you down, sweetheart. We're so sorry. Can you ever forgive us?" Their words should have brought some comfort, but all I could feel in that moment was a mixture of sadness and exhaustion. They were sorry now, but the damage had already been done. I glanced over at my grandparents, and the sadness on their faces was unmistakable. My grandmother's lips were pressed into a thin line, her eyes glistening as she looked down at her hands. My grandfather shook his head slowly, his expression a mix of disappointment and heartbreak. They didn't say a word, but the weight of their silence spoke volumes. They couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Days went by, and I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. Madison's confession, my parents' apologies, the way my grandparents had looked at me, it all replayed in my mind like a movie I couldn't turn off. I thought about Madison, how broken she'd seemed, and for the first time, I let myself see past the anger and hurt. She'd made a mess, yes, but she was finally trying to take responsibility. Maybe, just maybe, she deserved a second chance, not through money, but through guidance. After a lot of thought, I called her. "Madison," I said, my voice firm but calm, "I've decided to help you. Not by handing you money, but by helping you figure out how to get back on track. We'll sit down, go over your finances, and organize a plan to fix this. But only if you're ready to take it seriously." She was quiet for a moment before she agreed, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a start. And for the first time, I felt like I was taking a step toward healing, not just for me, but for both of us. After everything, I felt lighter, like a weight I'd been carrying for a long time had finally been lifted. The anger and hurt didn't disappear overnight, but I no longer felt trapped by them. I'd stood my ground, found my voice, and taken control of my own peace. For the first time, I felt like I could move forward, not for anyone else, but for myself. And that was enough.